Excellent. Welcome to the TAD Summit online conference. I'm really happy to have Kevin back from Cavero. Kevin, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Alan. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I remember when we were talking, I was like, yeah, we cover these like bleeding edge topics, and then in time they become very popular. And then we had the presentation from you. And then within months, we then had Google, Microsoft, and a host of carriers basically showing their quantum encryption chops. So that was a fast turnaround. So you're ahead of the curve, but only by a few months.
No, that's it. I'd love to think that we had some influence on them, Alan, you and I, in the work that we do on here, but I'm not entirely sure we did. But
I
no, you're
know.
right. It's look, the momentum's growing behind it. This week, the European Commission
Yes.
published a roadmap towards PQC.
Yeah,
Some interesting stuff on there. Some alignment with NIST in the
that's
US, but
true. Yes.
also some indications that 20 by the end of 2026, all states need to have completed the first stage,
Yeah.
and then get into what they call next steps after that, heading
Yes.
towards 2030. So the momentum is definitely growing, and as you say, as is always the case in the world we live in now, usually the major digital natives are at the forefront of the kind of thought leadership, and so they should be given their size and their.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But it is the dates are a lot sooner. I think that's the shift. When we were first talking, I was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's going to become important." And now, I mean, we should put a link in actually for the EU note that was
Yeah,
circulated, and talking about 2026, and that's only next year, and then through to 2030. I I mean, I remember when we were initially discussing, like, oh, 3 or 4 years ago, it was very well, in the 2030s time frame, and now, I mean, it's like, well, it's done, game over by the 2030s.
it seems that way. I mean, I think that there's an awful lot of theoretic discussion around
Yes.
the quantum agenda, as we'll touch on a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, there are no commercially available quantum computers as it
Nope.
stands.
No.
So, this is a movable feast. We have to be agile. We're going to use that word a lot, I think, in the next 40 minutes or so. But yeah, it's certainly gaining momentum, and the interest is not just coming from you know the specialists within deep cybersecurity now.
Yep.
The business applications and the impact are starting to be understood a little bit more and starting to be modelled a little bit more. And
Correct.
as a result, we have a broader audience to talk to. And whilst I'm learning all the time about this topic and about the journey that quantum represents, then so too is are each of the CTOs and each of the CEOs of the world's largest organizations. And
Correct.
that's just going to be a trickle down.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just commercial, it's governments as well. It's become basically for every country to have a clear plan in place because it's all their secrets. May not be, being decrypted, but are certainly being stored with the anticipation of decrypting sometime soon.
Well, when I presented back last year, we talked about the global socio-economic outlook, and we're living in very paranoid times, don't we?
Yeah.
So, every headline that you see, splattered across your social media, social channels, or whatever,
Yeah.
is kind of, it is fear.
Yes.
And the subject of quantum, obviously, when you put fear together with this incredible computational power, then people's minds run away with themselves a little
Yes.
bit. And,
Yeah.
for the average Joe on the street, I understand that could be scary. But for ourselves working in this sector, I think it's important we understand what our role is within that journey, and to get as best we can some definitive information out there and to help. And that's what we're doing. We're since we last spoke, there's an awful lot that's happened with us.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe we could just jump back to when we were last talking. You can give a quick update on the sort of conclusions from what's coming out of Cavera in making it easy to be quantum safe.
Sure. Yeah. No. So, I mean, just for those who are uninitiated to all things Cavero, we we enable organisations to build and sell quantum safe
Yeah.
cybersecurity products and services. And primarily we focus on strength and security and lightweight security.
Yeah.
Which there's a reason for that, because we want to, in many ways, make the pathway towards quantum a little bit easier than the products and services that are available at the moment, which suggest they will be. It's a software-based model. So our two main products are we've given them a name since we last
Oh, cool.
spoke. So we have Symmetric Key and Authentic Key. Symmetric Key is a quantum safe key exchange protocol, and it enables the creation of faster post-quantum cryptography solutions.
Gotcha.
And we're focusing on constrained environments, particularly because for us to be able to provide that service within the likes of a SIM card or a credit card or small IoT devices, for example, the software basis of what we do means that we can start to fill some of the gaps that we think exist within the current products portfolio, I guess, that exists within the quantum security space.
Okay.
So that's the symmetric key side of things, and then we have Authentic Key, which is a mutual endpoint authentication solution. It's symmetric, and it's faster and stronger than existing authentication protocols.
Yeah.
But it also supports quantum safe encryption, and again, we're looking at crypto agility as a really, really important part of our positioning. So what we do with Authentic Key is give the ability to have the basis and the access to classical security basis, to then be able to migrate into our own symmetric key keys, or if organizations so wish, let's say it's because of a specific regulatory requirement or legal requirement, they can look at other PQC algorithms as well, keys based on those algorithms.
Understood.
So that's what we do. Those are the two core products, and as I say, that really we're focused on quantum security, but we're also focused on the agility side of things.
I mean, that's something that I've been reading recently. People are talking about, so that, and it's being responsive to the different use cases. I mean, you hit SIM, credit card, but IoT. What are some of the use cases you're seeing there where people are worrying about quantum safe?
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about what I would call non-human identity.
Okay.
Non-human identities, they vastly outnumber human identities. The ratio is something like 40-1, 45-1, something like that.
Gotcha.
And it means that the IT operations don't necessarily have a handle on them. They're not necessarily, they may have authenticated once, as an example, over their life cycle of 2 to 3 years. And that simply isn't good enough.
Yeah.
When, with this explosion of these identities, these devices in the last 10 years, has meant that, unfortunately, whilst it brings new functionality and new reach, it also brings significantly more security threats.
Yeah.
So in terms of the scenarios you've got there, I mean, you can talk about just simple kind of utilities and pinging back information, but you can also go to API keys, digital certificates, all the kind of all these solutions are being used to secure the types of device that are out there at the moment. Yes. But again, the visibility and the inventory is not there isn't in my opinion, and I think it's reality. The security gaps are everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of use cases, that they're everywhere. I mean, the machines are literally surround us today, right? But industrial deployments, employee solutions to support employee authentication. Those are the types of scenario that we think will probably be the most relevant for us in the first instance, because if you link human identity and machine identity, both of which we have solutions for, then you're addressing probably the most pressing concerns that your IT managers will have today.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it's interesting. My wife earlier this week, power went out. For whole, not just the buildings she was in, but like for the the estate she was on, the industrial estate, and that was it. Everything had to close down. I mean, I think it was linked mostly to the AC, but immediately all the buildings started getting very hot. So
Yeah.
energy can basically just stop production. I mean, where did she go? She came back home and then was having a migraine later in the day because it was so damned hot in the offices.
Well, we talk about, I mean, zero trust as a
Yeah.
concept, right? Which basically means always verify.
Yeah.
That's the. It feels to me like all of the knowledgeable guidance suggests zero trust is the
Correct.
promised land.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so when we talk about non-human identities, then there's a huge, void that
Yes.
needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
given the nature of our products and services, and what we need to, first of all, we have the solutions that are lightweight, that can be processed, on really small devices.
Yes.
And so some of our tests, I mean, probably the most prominent test we have, and the furthest down the line we are with one of our partners, and we're looking at SIM cards,
Yep.
and we're looking at quantum security being loaded on SIM cards, and therefore then the ability to be able to authenticate the SIM card itself,
Yep.
the handset, and therefore the user. If you then use a combination of the information and the factors, the identification factors that you could build
Yep.
into an authentication workflow. But the key here, Alan, is that our solution is only going to address one part of an authentication workflow.
Yes.
So in the same way that if you look at from the encryption perspective, our solution will work for certain applications, but will not be there probably in government data centers as the primary function for protecting state secrets. And I think what we're learning is that to have end-to-end visibility of your authentication workflow, for example, and then to understand the variance of the products and services, the cryptographic solutions, all of the other authentication channels, and we've talked about SMS
Yes.
until the cows come home. We've got network APIs, we've got email, we've got a myriad of authentication channels we'll talk about in a bit. But what organizations need to be able to do is understand how can they scale, or how can they level up their authentication, but do it in a frictionless manner, because it's really difficult if you put something in there that doesn't fit within that life cycle, within that workflow, and then you have to re-engineer everything around it. So what we do is provide the ability to in Authenticate to be able to provide effectively hot swappable security bases. So you could have ECDH in there as your primary security basis, and then you can swap out to, as I say, let's say a NIST algorithm. You can swap out to our Cavero keys, but it gives you the ability to build this in gradually, and that kind of moves us towards the discussion around crypto agility.
Oh, that's interesting. So I also look at it like layers of an onion, and the security requirements vary depending on the risks associated with the different use cases, the reach of the the different. I mean, because some are very passive; it could be just a camera, while some are a meter, and it's a meter that could be switched off. So
exactly, it might just be very small data transactions, once a month or whatever. But what's the impact of that?
Yes.
Of that device on the broader network, on the broader infrastructure within which it sits?
Exactly.
And I can't answer that question. But if you and I, are nodding our heads, we know that there's a risk there.
Exactly.
It poses a greater threat. And as I say, we'll talk about authentication a little bit more further down the line on this call. But what I feel really strongly is there is no solution. There's no perfect fit for anything at the moment.
No.
The whole marketplace is evolving. So the standards upon which we operate, let's say the European Commission will write a paper, as they have done this week. Are still really in an early stage of their evolution. And a lot of them simply are not practical. So in our own tests, in our own journey so far, we've had to change out parts of the security basis simply because there's just too much data to transfer in order to be quantum secure, and it doesn't necessarily work in terms of a realistic application. So particularly when you focus on the ability to be lightweight, to be agile, and for us to therefore give our partners that agility, it's really important that our security basis and all of our products, they're lightweight, they're software based, and they've got to fit in that space.
Yeah.
And that solves some of the problems that are out there. It doesn't solve all of them, but it
No, no,
solves some.
no. Yeah, and it definitely, expands, the coverage of the attack surfaces. Because I think, that's very, I mean, it's the 3 points you're making in terms of it's software based, it's lightweight, and it can protect the bits that need to, because again, it's a reach thing. Because when we're talking about authentication, it's again, it's going to vary on the devices. We're not putting in something that is like, for government secrets, but you still want to have something that's more secure than the basic, AES or, whatever sort of encryption that is by default on today that we know is not secure. So if you're like energy company, which, again, could be absolutely a target of attack, and it would be, of course, a multi-factor, a multi-target attack. Because once you start impacting power, it doesn't have to be, across the country. It just needs to be in a few places. You then start taking critical infrastructure down. And just coming back to the my wife and the power that went out in the industrial estate, the mobile service went down as well.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't just,
Well, that's just maybe a microscopic
Yes.
example of what happened in Europe.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So what we had, I'm trying to remember how long ago it was, but I remember that I think it was about 6 weeks, 2 months ago now.
Yeah, yeah. It was a couple of months. Yeah.
And it was the Spanish grid. I mean, the government came out with some cock and bull excuse the other day, I think, which I absolutely don't believe. But regardless, that affected the whole Iberian Peninsula.
Yes.
It affected some parts of southern France.
Yeah.
And one or two other parts of Europe as well. Such was the reach of
the scope of it.
Exactly. And then as you say, mobile networks started to go down. I mean, we lost power around mid. No, sorry. It was around midday.
Yeah.
And I think the last call that I was able to be on was about 3:20 in the afternoon.
Wow.
Which I was tethered on the mobile network. So
Yeah.
obviously the broadband and what have you had been down for quite some time.
Yeah.
But I was still able to function for a few hours.
Yeah.
But then from 3:20 till 4 a.m. the next morning, we were in the dark.
Wow.
We were really in the dark. And that was a really crazy example of how vulnerable we all are.
Yeah.
When critical services go down and when the communications networks go down.
Yeah.
And living in southern Spain, as you can imagine, many people here felt, well, this is great. This is the kind of life that we want to live. They find all of these communication channels something of an inconvenience.
Yeah, distraction. Yeah.
But in reality, that it brings us back to the topic we've been discussing.
Yeah.
The vulnerabilities.
Yes.
This not just, some of them at the core of our infrastructure, but also some of them at the periphery of the infrastructure.
Yes.
And then you set that down to enterprise level. Then you start to work in a domain where we as an organisation are focusing our efforts. And as I say, a mobile handset and a SIM as an example. Fantastic, use cases for us to demonstrate just how powerful that can be.
Exactly, because then you can protect across all those different devices. That's interesting, yeah, because I remember, over here in the US, they have, I mean, we're in the burbs, but there's, diesel backup to most of the base stations.
Sure.
So when we've had like power out for a couple of weeks because of a hurricane, the cell service still runs. Now, I can remember the first time it happened, we were still on cable. And the problem with cable is it has active nodes in the network. So, of course, power's out, that's it, no cable. The next time it happened, well, that was a full 2-week thing where that happened. It's passive optical network. So there's, again, diesel generators at the local exchange and a passive fiber all the way to your home where you're running it off your generator. But I mean, that's an extreme, but that shows just how complex and the different types of devices and the type of authentication you need to be able to protect against malicious actions. Because this is something where, it's not going to be hackers going away taking things down. This is going to be basically agents, bots, that are going through and systematically just knocking everything down. So whether it's a million components or a couple of tens of millions, it makes no difference. It's all just software, as you said.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just one final point, actually, that you've just reminded me about there. We are agnostic of communication channel.
Yeah.
So if you look, and like I said, we're going to talk about authentication in a moment, but if you look at authentication channels such as SMS as an example, that obviously is reliant on the mobile network.
Yes.
We can work over LoRa, we can work over a multitude of different communication channels, but it also presents a challenge. It's something that we're learning about as well, back to the workflows and building the workflows. We don't have a communication channel built into our solution.
Yeah.
So we therefore need to work with partners who are able to understand how to architect authentication workflows and build it in. And I listened to your fantastic show with Stefan a couple of weeks ago from Authentication, and like I said, we'll come on to it. But there's an awful lot of use cases that we need to be able to grow out. We need to be able to demonstrate that we can start to look at continuous authentication. If we are truly going to see these zero trust principles applied, then we have to create the mechanisms, and it's a combination of different factors within the ecosystem that need to come together. And the people who are actually responsible for the solutions themselves, and that could be any number of organizations. It could be enterprises themselves. It could be the people in the middle who are creating kind of security value-added services and solutions.
Yeah,
they've got to think about how do we ensure. You've just given a great example of diesel generators and passive optical networks, and how that comes together. Well, probably not going to be the most scalable solution.
No, it isn't.
But we're able to create the value and provide these services and ultimately provide the security.
Exactly.
But we need the communication channels, and that's an interesting fact.
Yeah, because that really, for me, is driven. Because I read it and I go, "Oh, it's marketing BS" in terms of quantum agility. But then talking about these real use cases and trying to make that quantum safe thing, go, "Oh, I now can appreciate the complex problem that you're facing in enabling, an adequate layer of protection that's comparable to the risk of exposure for those different layers of the onion." So cool.
Absolutely.
That's really helped me, understand and now have a far better appreciation around quantum agility. So cool. I mean, thanks for that. Any other issues you want to bring up, Kevin? Because this has really helped me understand the complexity of the challenge we're facing at the moment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've covered the crypto agility piece. We've covered a non-human identity, which I think is a big challenge. I think for all of us. But in terms of authentication, I've touched on continuous authentication.
Yes.
I think that's so important. It's so important, and you've got to think about the user experience. So we're providing quantum levels of security, quantum safe services.
Yeah.
To many people, they don't need them today.
Yeah.
But I would also argue that the existing solutions are not working. We've talked about it till the cows come home, Alan, you and I. And we know that there are 7 or 8, familiar authentication channels out there.
Yes.
But we need to do better. We need to do better. And we also need to consider, if we're going to do better, is that going to make the user experience better or worse? And our job and our product is targeting the ability to be able to provide that level of security in the right environment with the right products, whilst maintaining or enhancing the user experience.
Yes, because it's a matter of national security. I mean, that's the key. That's what we're talking about here. It's providing that level of protection that you can protect your country to not be hit like Spain was hit.
Yes, definitely. But I mean, even if you take it just to an everyday transaction for a financial institution, for you, for example, we need to provide the level of security that stops the level of fraud, and bad actors.
Yeah, it's simple access. Exactly. It's just an access.
Absolutely. And at the moment, what we're doing is kind of hedging the ease of deliverability against the user experience, against the security level that we apply. And classical key or cryptography keys combined with, let's say, familiar channels that we use, but not necessarily, the most secure channels means that we can't demonstrate as an industry, as a population,
Yeah.
that we're addressing these problems at the moment. And
Interesting.
we're all going to be asked some more searching questions as we head towards 2030.
Oh, yeah. That's really interesting. But definitely, I'll include the link from the EU Commission that it's just published. But, well, let's face it. I think this topic is going to be rolling on and on and on. I know there'll be, Microsoft will do a quantum computing demo, or Google will do one, and then everybody will go, liar, it's not true. And it is hard for a lot of consumers, just general public, to look on and go, well, what's real, what's not real. But again, I think that at least we've got dates now, 2026, 2030 from the EU Commission, that's showing you need to be addressing these issues in having the plan, in being able to demonstrate quantum agility, quantum safe agility.
Well, once it gets to the point where there's a mandate from government,
yeah,
you then have enterprises, the major enterprises, who have to follow suit. Look at the financial services sector, for example.
Yeah.
Look at the biggest, digital natives and the major internet properties out there.
Yeah.
They have to pretty much follow suit. But not for regulatory purposes, but ultimately customer choice.
Yes.
If you're a mobile network and your service is not quantum secure in the next year or so,
yeah,
and other mobile networks is, then you've got to straight away got to say there's a proportion of our subscriber base we're going to be looking at. We're going to be considering a very real threat of churn.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, financial services, government, I mean, immediately, anything that has a state-related function. Wow. That's interesting. So we could be within a year or two seeing carriers talking about quantum safe.
Oh, I absolutely. I see no way that carriers won't have at least the responsibility to have a clear policy on how they're migrating towards quantum, in the same way that the other organisations have just described. But when you consider the importance of these things, and the way that our lives are so dominated by them,
yes,
and as an attack interface, that is the biggest attack interface that we all feel like we have.
Yeah.
I'm not too fussed about my front gate, but I am fussed about what comes through that. And so when you consider that, if the service providers, the applications, the core network services that we access are not quantum safe, then we first of all, we know today there's a level of vulnerability. We see it all the time. Grandma's being spammed.
Yeah.
We've got, the amount of smishing is going through the roof.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was very fortunate to sit on the judging committee yesterday on the anti-fraud products in the Antonio Mucci.
Cool.
And we were evaluating sort of the products and services that are out there. And it's clear to me that there's been good progress on utilizing AI and machine learning to understand how to detect and how to therefore reduce the risk that smishing particularly poses to the subscriber on the handset.
Yeah.
But we're nowhere near where we should be, and that's where again, the likes of services, the services that we provide, will provide a level of security that isn't experienced for any of these users at the moment.
Exactly.
And it's an increment. It doesn't cover everything. It doesn't address every threat.
No.
But it's an increment. So from a responsibility perspective, I know that there's some great products out there. There aren't enough. And there aren't enough that are actually being deployed effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And it was an interesting conversation having at about 6:30 this morning. It's swim season, so it's like I'm up early at 5 something to get my son to swim at 6. So it means I'm taking calls now at 6:30 in the morning. But it was with Visha, which is they deal with the training for employees around voice phishing. Because you got voice AI, it enables a whole host of really interesting attack vectors, and you need your employees to be trained in the real world around how those vectors can hit the attack surfaces. So it's basically it's a service, and they basically it's agents are just calling in. I mean, artificial agents calling in and doing a whole host of different attack vectors. So the you employees need to, because this is the web training and okay, yeah, I got it. But no, this is actually testing your employees for real in protecting your business and protecting your customers.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have real world experience of that, and whilst there's plenty of things I could say, say to the other to the to how do I put it? There's plenty of things that I could have a grumble about. Let's put it that way with one of my previous employees. What I would say is that they had a really good program on social engineering and ensuring that our people understood the threat of social engineering in the security and in the concern from a cybersecurity perspective of the whole organisation. And I suspect that wasn't all that long ago. With the advancements in AI and particularly voice AI, that will need to be refreshed and continued. But it's a great point that that represents quite a scary reality, and that
well, it's an acceleration. But then it doesn't matter how much you're taught; it's once you've experienced, you remember. So it's then making it so that people experience it. So your best, your most important asset, your people, can protect your most important assets, which are your customers and your business. So yeah, it's really interesting, piece that's so multi-layered. Again, it's, let's face it, I remain astounded at just how rapidly the whole quantum safe industry is moving forward. And again, you were there saying, look, we've got to make it scalable. We've got to make it easy within the existing infrastructure is there. We can't just have these high-end, expensive, basically sub-zero, well, not sub-zero, but, close to, 0 Kelvin devices sat out there.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, I think some people's perspective on quantum security will be about quantum key distribution. It will be about the principles of connecting fiber, and therefore, how do you deploy that on a global basis? You don't.
Correct.
Again, it's all about this layered approach. You've got to understand that there are certain entities, certain factors, certain use cases, and certain security risks that can be addressed by something like quantum key distribution. But by the same token, PQC, the algorithms that exist to protect, let's say, the middle ground of and replace the algorithms that protect our communications channels, our at rest, all of that today, they're simply, we haven't quite got far enough in terms of the market development. And again, that's where we come in, because there are many gaps there, and particularly at the end of the spectrum, when you're looking at, like I say, non-human identity.
Exactly.
And you've got an awful lot of opportunity there. But it has come on a lot, but it will develop an awful lot more in the next 2 to 3 years, and it's going to be a very, very exciting space. If it's your thing, cybersecurity, and it's now my thing, then I get more excited about cybersecurity than I did a few years ago. Say that. And the advancements and the kind of partnerships, the deployments, and the testing that we're doing at the moment is genuinely exciting in terms of the ability to democratize access to this level of security.
That's interesting.
And we feel privileged to be one of the front runners in terms of the innovation of that part of the market.
Excellent. Well, no, this has been really insightful. So again, Kevin, thanks so much for giving us some of your time, and we're looking forward to how this is all going to basically roll out over the next few years. And it's not, well, maybe in the next few years, it will be over the next year, too, for certain.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Alan, and looking forward to the next update.
Speak to you soon.